Hi, my name is Shani. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Bunnyshell, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how development pipeline works without Bunnyshell and with Bunnyshell. And also along those lines, I'll talk a little bit more about shift left with ephemeral environments. So let's talk about how development process works today. So you have the main branch, and then you have two developers working on separate features. Let's say one front end, one back end. Feature 1, feature 2. Both developers are starting to write code, and feature 1 is ready to be merged. So developer makes a pull request, goes through review changes, etc., goes into the main branch, and then you start the build process. The build process, depending on your code base, can take anywhere from a few minutes up to 2 hours. Developer 1 during that time can either go have coffee. If it takes about 2 hours, it's probably going to be a long coffee, or otherwise he would actually start working on another branch. This is, by the way, V1. Okay, build process is done. Now we go through testing. During this process, while we build the new version, while we run through regression testing, developer 2, even though his code base might be ready, is not able to merge that into the main branch because that will conflict with the changes that the front-end developer has made. And so he's essentially waiting. He cannot merge. Let's say the testing wasn't successful, so now you have to fix that. Now you start a full process of, again, writing code. Actually, prior to writing code, you need to debug and figure out what the issues are. You debug, you have to write the code, and then you have to start the build process all over again, and the testing process all over again. Think how frustrating that experience can be for a developer that, if build takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then assuming testing doesn't get triggered at that same moment because there's only one shared environment, testing might take a few more hours. It can be a day, 2, maybe sometimes a couple of days until you actually get some feedback done. And all of that work with this point is essentially reworking the existing code. While he does that, developer 2 is still waiting. He still can't merge that code. Let's talk about how the development process works with Bunnyshell. So we start the process the same way. We have version 1, front-end developer, back-end developer. They each fork their branch. They start writing code. Front-end developer just finished writing his code, makes a pull request, and environment is set up. Feature 1 dot dev dot company .com. We start testing. Let's say testing wasn't successful. We found a bug. Now we have to fix that bug. The front-end developer can connect to that same environment using remote development. Essentially, we proxy some of the services into his local machine, and he uses his local IDE. He makes the changes and just runs another cycle again. No need to rebuild, no need to wait for the staging environment to be available, etc. At that same time, by the way, developer 2, the backend developer, can do the same thing. So the code is ready. It immediately goes through testing. Okay? Let's say, it wasn't successful. So again, he rewrites the code. Runs for another cycle of testing. By the way, I should have mentioned, he creates a pull request and the environment is spin up. feature2.dev, etc., etc., etc. They all work in parallel. This is what shift left is about. Shift left is about giving developers immediate feedback, getting testing as close to development as possible. And you can see here the feedback loop is literally in the matter of minutes to hours. Let's say developer one, just went for another cycle of testing and it was successful. And now he's ready to merge that into the main branch. We go through a rebuild process. That rebuild process, by the way, this is the first time we actually rebuild the application. So again, we save a lot of time on building and rebuilding the application. By the time we merge, the likelihood, the quality of the application is much, much better. So the likelihood that we'll need to rebuild that again and again and again is much, much lower. Now we have version 2. Developer, the backend developer was, when he forked the environment, it was on version 1. One of the things that Bunnyshell does is it auto-updates the environment to make sure, we avoid drift issues. So at this point, we're going to auto-update the existing environments, and the existing environments are going to be now V2. And again, now testing is successful. We've already tested on V2, as opposed to what would happen historically where, by the time we fork, we merge we forked version 1, we're trying to merge version 1 into a newer version, version 2. Here, again, the environment is automatically updated, ready to be merged into the main branch, go through a rebuild process, and there you have version 3. So, to summarize, with a Ephemeral environment, you get two things. First of all, instead of having static environments that are running 24/7 and hurting your cloud bill, essentially you have environments that are dynamic, environments that are up when they're needed and down when they're not needed. You have full stack environments that are being used to test as close to development as possible so that the developer doesn't have to spend a lot of time switching context because he has to wait for the build process, for the test process, for feedback, etc. If you have automated testing, if you have a CI/CD, you can trigger, we can create an environment, we parameterize those environments, we expose those endpoints, so you can use them to run API testing, functional testing, UI testing, regression testing, even integration testing, because we create a full stack environment. The developers don't block one another. In most companies, you have a single staging environment that's shared between all the developers. And essentially, once developer 1 merged his code, developer 2, developer 3, 4, etc., they cannot merge their code. Here, again, they can all work in parallel. You're essentially limited just by the number of pull requests that you can make at any given time, and you can spin up as many environments as you'd like. The cost of those environments is not high, because they are Ephemeral environments, so that means that they're short-term lived. They have a single purpose. They're isolated, so if there is a bug, you can easily trace that back to a defect. You can easily connect with remote development and debug that on your local IDE. It's a much more productive, rich, and faster experience for the developer. And the result, much less time reworking the code, much more time shipping new features. Thank you.